Welcome to this explainer. Today we are unpacking the historic, sometimes surprising, and, well, downright bizarre firsts for all 46 American presidents. We always hear about their policies and the politics, but tracking their weirdest milestones, like who was the first to ride in a submarine or literally just put a telephone on their desk, is actually one of the absolute best ways to map the evolution of the United States itself. So let's dive right into this. To really understand how the highest office in the land has evolved, we're going to trace the presidency from the era of horse-drawn carriages all the way up to the digital age. We'll answer some pretty wild questions along the way, like which commander-in-chief was the first to embrace rail travel, or decades later launched their very own cryptocurrency. Okay, Section 1, Setting the Presidential Precedents. So much of our modern government was established simply by George Washington just existing. As the very first president, he was unavoidably the first to do almost everything. He laid the absolute groundwork by issuing the first veto, the first executive order, and the first pardon. But honestly, most importantly, he was the first to voluntarily step down after 2 terms. Then we have John Adams. He was the first vice president to step up to the top job and the first to move into a still under construction White House. But Adams also experienced a rather painful first. The very first sting of losing a re-election to his own vice president and political rival. Now, as the country rapidly expanded its borders, the presidential milestones evolved right along with it. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson became the first president to be inaugurated in Washington, D.C. By 1812, James Madison became our first wartime president, setting the precedent of officially asking Congress to declare war. As new tech crept in, James Monroe became the first to ride a steamboat in 1817, and by 1825, John Quincy Adams achieved a massive first. He was the first to be photographed, though, to be fair, that was after he left office. Crucially, though, he was the first president who wasn't a founding father. 7. Believe it or not, 7 American presidents were born in log cabins. It's like the ultimate symbol of the American dream, right? And it all started with Andrew Jackson. Jackson was a man of intense contrasts and some pretty wild firsts. He was the first to face an assassination attempt, the first to ride a train, and, according to some slightly shaky but super fascinating historical evidence, he might have even been the first president to get a tattoo. Moving on to Section 2, Expansion and National Turmoil. This rapid-fire era really tested the very limits of the Constitution. Just look at 1837. Martin Van Buren was actually the first president born after the U.S. officially became a country. But then 1841 hits, and William Henry Harrison becomes the first president to tragically die while in office. Because the Constitution was, frankly, a little vague on what happens next, John Tyler simply took it upon himself to take over, setting a massive constitutional precedent by becoming the first to become president without actually being elected to the office. In this era, we also saw James Polk become the first under 50, and Zachary Taylor, who had remarkably never been elected to any prior office before winning the whole shebang. Now, presidents like Millard Fillmore and Franklin Pierce, they didn't exactly make massive constitutional waves, but they completely changed the day-to-day life at the executive mansion. Fillmore established a permanent White House library and brought in a modern kitchen stove. Pierce followed that up by having central heating installed and bringing the very first Christmas tree right into the White House. Section 3. Tragedy and Technological Shifts. This particular era brought a massive contrast of extremes. Abraham Lincoln suffered the tragic first of being assassinated, which made him the first to lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda for the public to mourn. On a later note, he was also the first born outside the 13 colonies, the first with a full beard, and, fun fact, the first to have pet cats in the White House. His successor, Andrew Johnson, faced the first ever presidential impeachment, surviving by just a single vote. Yet, he still found time to lighten the mood by being the first to welcome an organized baseball team to the White House. During the Gilded Age, the executive mansion itself was rapidly transforming. Ulysses S. Grant hosted the first official state dinner. Rutherford Hayes got the very first telephone installed. Chester A. Arthur, who notably weighed over 200 pounds, conveniently had the first elevator installed. And Benjamin Harrison brought electric lighting to the White House. The world was speeding up, and the presidency was keeping pace. As we move toward the dawn of the 20th century, we see these massive leaps in media and transit. In 1895, Grover Cleveland became the first president captured on motion picture film while signing a bill. Just a few years later, William McKinley took the ultimate technological leap by becoming the first president to take a ride in an automobile. The horse and buggy era of the presidency was officially in the rearview mirror. Which brings us to Section 4, entering the global stage. Literally, no one brought more unprecedented energy to the office than Theodore Roosevelt. He was an absolute overachiever who utterly redefined the presidency. He racked up a genuinely exhausting list of firsts. Believe it or not, he was the first sitting president to travel outside the country. He was the first to ride in a submarine, the first to fly in an airplane, and he literally built the West Wing just to get his work done. To top it all off, he wasn't just the first president, but the first American overall to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Communication and administration shifted totally dramatically in the subsequent era. Taft was the first to officially work in the newly built Oval Office and throw a ceremonial baseball pitch. Wilson completely changed media relations by being the first to hold regular press conferences. Then Warren Harding was the first president to have his voice broadcast on a radio, allowing him to reach the public directly. He was also the first to actually use the phrase Founding Fathers. And amazingly, it took all the way until 1929 for Herbert Hoover to be the first president to have a telephone directly on his own desk. Section 5. The Television Era Presidents. Franklin D. Roosevelt shadowed precedents left and right. He dominated early media by being the first to appear on television, and he shrank the globe by being the first sitting president to fly across the ocean, visiting 3 different continents. He even established the very first presidential library and was the first named Times Person of the Year. Harry Truman then took the visual medium to the next level with the first nationally televised inauguration. Also, fun little aside, he was the first to install a bowling alley and go bowling at the White House. The Cold War era brought us the modern superpower presidency. Dwight Eisenhower was the first to preside over a full 50-state union. He took presidential transit to the skies, being the first to ride in a jet and helicopter, and he even appeared on color TV. John F. Kennedy brought his own firsts, being the first Roman Catholic president, and to manage those intense global tensions, JFK centralized the immense pressure of the nuclear age into a single room by creating the famous Situation Room in the West Wing. The late 20th century really tested the physical reach and institutional stability of the office. LBJ got a call button for his aides and visited Australia. Nixon became the first to visit every single one of the 50 states while in office. Ford had the unfortunate first of testifying in a criminal trial. Jimmy Carter, incredibly, was our very first president actually born in a hospital, a fact that really reminds you just how recent modern medicine is in the grand scheme of US history, right? And in 1985, Ronald Reagan made constitutional history by being the first to temporarily transfer power to his VP under the 25th Amendment during a surgery. And finally, Section 6, Firsts in the Digital Age. Just think about this incredible leap in history for a second. Just over a century after Rutherford Hayes marveled at a basic landline telephone in 1877, Bill Clinton, our first boomer president, was sitting in the Oval Office sending emails. He was the first to use the internet in office and even had his inauguration streamed online. The digital floodgates were officially wide open. Barack Obama achieved numerous historic demographic firsts. He was the first African-American and multi-ethnic president, and the first born outside the 48 contiguous states, hailing from Hawaii. But he also pushed the boundaries of where a president goes and how they communicate. He was the first sitting president to travel north of the Arctic Circle, the first to visit a federal prison, and, marking a major shift in modern media, he was the first sitting president to appear on a podcast. The most recent administrations have brought completely unique and, honestly, unprecedented anomalies to our historical list. Donald Trump was the first billionaire president, the first to launch his own cryptocurrency, the first to own and be banned from a social media platform, and the first to attend a UFC competition while in office. Following him, Joe Biden achieved his own distinct firsts, being the first president to join a union picket line while in office, the first to become a great-grandfather during his term, and of course, the first to serve alongside a female vice president. So, what you should really take away from this explainer is that the presidency is never stagnant. From George Washington signing the very first law, to modern presidents launching digital currencies and navigating social media, the office is in a constant state of evolution and adapts to the technology, the culture, and the crises of its time. Which leaves us with one final thrilling thought to ponder. As technology and society continue to accelerate, what extraordinary and unimaginable firsts will the next era of presidents bring? Thanks for joining me on this journey through history. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.